Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Stand Up Speakeasy. I'm your host, Srethney, and every episode of the Stand Up Speakeasy, I bring on a guest from my stand up comic from all over the country, and we interview each other, and well, I interview them, and we talk about their comedy journey. So, with that being said, coming to the stage is Andrew. Hey, Andrew, how are you?
Hello. Thank you for having me. This is a pleasure. Thank you.
You're welcome, indeed. Thank you for being my guest today. It means a lot.
Oh, it's no problem at all. Sorry, I need as I explained beforehand, the pop filter on my mic is permanently stuck loose. I can't tighten it or loosen it, so I keep trying to no avail. I should just stop. I'm sure it'd be distracting.
You're totally fine. Indeed. I have like this Razer mic or this Razer camera has like a built-in like ring light and microphone into it. It's pretty neat.
Nice.
Indeed. And I was like looking for something on a budget, and my laptop webcam was just destroyed, so I had to find something. So
Hey, whatever works,
indeed, most definitely.
This mic I got towards the beginning of the pandemic because of a project I'm working on, and it's pretty good. I might have finally. Sorry, we're starting off the show with an incredible historical moment here. I think I might have finally managed to get this filter unstuck. Maybe not. All right. Sorry to get everyone's expectations up, but maybe by the end of the show.
Indeed, most definitely. So you're based out of Brooklyn, and you're a comedian and a writer. And what got you into comedy and writing?
So back in high school, I think I would watch. I watched like Comedy Central. I think the first time, I'd like to joke around. It's funny. My freshman year, I was in my family. We moved to Charlotte, North Carolina when I was 5. We're Jewish. A lot of people, I guess, don't know that there are a lot of Jews in the South, or, I don't know if I'd say a lot, but enough. I don't know what the amount should be, but we went there, and then we moved to Memphis, Tennessee when I was in high school. And already I would kind of, I feel like everyone says, I don't know. Some people say that they were shy. I was definitely shy in my freshman year, where I went to a bigger school. And then when we moved to Memphis, I went to this very small private Jewish yeshiva school, and I would kind of goof around. And you never want to self-describe as like the funny one, because the funny one is always the person, right, who comes up to you as a comedian and is like, oh, my friends all say I'm the funny one and I should do comedy. So, but I would do that when I think I would be a bit of a goof, but I would watch Comedy Central, watch a lot of stand-up on that, and eventually just was like, I want to do that. I think Eugene Merman was one of the first people who I saw. There were other people I liked, and I would quote to people, but I saw him and I was like, oh, I want to do like that kind of sort of absurd thing that he does. I was like, I want to do something like that. I started writing in a notebook. We had a class in my senior year, which, like I said, was a very small Jewish high school. And so a lot of stuff was non-standardized. We had some class where we just got to work on a creative project for the entire semester and then present it at the end. And so I worked on and then performed a half hour, technically my first time performing, which was nuts. One of my classmates got it on video, and I should check at him to see if he has it anywhere, because I'm sure it does not hold up, but it was my first time ever performing for like other kids in my class, probably like 10 people, half hour. And then when I came to New York, I came back to New York, because I was born here, but in 2009, and I was going to college here, and I went to a vendor fair that they had early on, and there was someone there from Comics Comedy Club, RIP. It's been gone for probably a better part of a decade now. And I was like, what do I do if I want to start doing stand-up? And he was like, go to Mike's. And I started going to Mike's. I started barking at this club in the East Village. And yeah, that was 2009. And now it's over a decade later, I guess. So.
Indeed. And
there you go.
And your fiance describes your comedy as smart. I don't know, and you only gave her 10 seconds to answer. What does she think about it now?
That's so. I asked her that because I was literally writing my bio for my website, and one thing I realized is that I realized like I needed something not boring. Because the weird thing about comedy bios is whenever people write them for like a festival or for anything that you have to write or a club or whatever, and they ask for like when anything you're doing, they ask for a bio. There's like, it always feels like there's either a dichotomy where it's like just listing off a bunch of random festivals that most people probably don't care about, but like it looks nice to say like, oh, and the Central Texas River Fest and the Space Fest 2020 and the Gulf Stream Comedy Festival or whatever it is. Or there's the ones who just write something like Jeff Johnson died when he was supposed to be writing his bio, and now he's writing it from heaven. Uh-oh, help me. Or it's just totally goofy. And so mine on the website is mostly, I guess, listing kind of credit stuff. So it's more the former, but I was like, you need something else because that's just so dull. And so I was just like, I was like, how would you describe, and also because that's the other thing is people try and self-describe, if you're fortunate enough to have been featured in some newspaper profile, you can probably pull a quote that was like, satirizing and lampooning the very essence of our time. So-and-so's comedy is as clever as it is introspective. And, and then you can be like, yeah, sure, that works. But when you try and like self-describe, because I've had people say like, what's your comedy like? And I'm like, absurd, kind of, not different. It's like a grab bag of stuff. I feel like because anything you say feels like you're like too self-congratulatory if you're just like, it's great, it's funny, the best ever. And so I just, in the moment when I was writing it, asked her that. I think she'd probably still describe it pretty similarly. I will say one thing that I realized is I like one of the first comedians who I got like pretty into was Dimitri Martin. And I think Dimitri Martin's a comedian for at least a lot of people like me who kind of come in at that angle of, I want to write kind of clever jokes and bits. It's not that everyone wants to write clever jokes and bits, but like, as opposed to like, I'm really good at like telling these crazy stories from my life, which is not what I don't really have an interesting life. Like I have a joke I opened with when I did an outdoor show back in September that I just said like, a lot of comedians have been talking about being nervous after months of quarantine because they won't have anything interesting to talk about. But lucky for me, my life was never interesting. So, I'm used to it. Like Dimitri Martin, someone who I think a lot of people sort of get to a point, especially with comedians, where they're like, oh, Dimitri Martin, like he's the kind of comedian you liked in high school or whatever. But like, I think it's because he's good and he's accessible in that way. because again, it is something where you're like, oh, if you're a high school kid, at least in my instance, and you don't party or anything, like, I mean, I don't know, you could have comedians. It's not that it's wrong to have comedians who talk about like doing drugs and having sex, but like if you're 14, unless you live harder than I do right now, you decent chance you might find that less relatable because you're like, well, I don't know. I'm 14. I haven't had sex. I haven't done drugs. But like you watch Dimitri Martin and he's like, oh, here's why beavers are weird. And you're like, I know what a beaver is. And then you see a comedian doing a sex joke and they're like, here's why beavers are weird. But so he's someone who I think everyone who wants to follow stand-up or who, kind of gets tuned into that, kind of will watch him when they're, or at least did. I guess now, it almost feels like now that's John Mulaney for a lot of people, who John Mulaney, I think is fantastic, but like, I know he's like, I guess kind of a lot of his stuff like will go viral on TikTok or Tumblr. Cause it's a similar sort of thing where like teenagers can watch it and, relate to a lot of what he's saying because so much of it is not necessarily, even though, he talks about, having addictions and stuff, but like a lot of stuff that's, pop culture, TV, whatever, people, even if you haven't lived a life, so to speak, so far. So anyway, all of this was to say that one thing I think is good about Dimitri Martin's stand-up is it kind of makes everyone gets it because it's pretty accessible, but they feel like other people wouldn't, I think. Like you sort of hear and it makes you feel clever, even though it's actually accessible and you're not more clever than anyone else. And I kind of like trying to go for that too. So that's one of the things I'll kind of self-describe. But otherwise, like I asked her just to give me something because to put in the bio, because I just was like, I can't. I hate trying to like self-describe my own stand-up,
Indeed, most definitely. It's much easier if your pals do it for you or your significant other and stuff like that. So
yeah.
While you were in high school, you were hired to write sketch comedy videos and to be shown at bar mitzvah parties. And what are some of those early sketch videos like?
So that's actually a great example of, I'm trying to remember, I did 2 of them. I'm trying to remember how the first one happened. I think I worked there was another kid in the school who did like editing video stuff and was kind of, I think he probably asked me about it because we would do, so every year there's a Jewish holiday called Purim, which is like, kind of a goofy, fun one. People always, when they describe Jewish holidays, will try to, or I'm sure holidays of any non-Christian religion in America, because Christian holidays, everyone has the touchstone for culturally in America. It's like the default. So Purim people will describe as like Jewish Halloween because people dress up. And every year the seniors would make a Purim video, which would be kind of like a series of sketches and, making fun of stuff that happened that year in the school or some teachers or whatever. And I would participate in that. So that's probably how it got started, with something off of that. And the 2 sketches that I remember specifically, one was a mix. I don't remember exactly how it went into it, but one was like a mix between American Idol and Cribs. And it was, there, at one point he's like auditioning for like different people from the synagogue, including the rabbi. And I'd cast the rabbi, who was an Israeli rabbi who came to be the rabbi of the synagogue for a few years. And I'd like kind of cast him as like the Randy Jackson stand-in. And so I had, his dialogue was like, look, dog, that was incredible. You read your bar mitzvah portion so well, dog. And he just says to me when I give him the script, he was like, Andrew, I am not going to call him a dog. And I'm like, no, it's not. All right, whatever, fine. And the other one was I was told specifically by the kid's parents that he really liked Deal or No Deal. So it was like Deal or No Deal, except every case had like a slideshow of like, oh, his time at camp, like the photo slideshow of, oh, him doing sports. And like, I forget if I hosted, I think it either hosted or his brother did. I think I had volunteered to host it. No, because I was one of the Deal or No Deal girls. Now I'm remembering. I had a wig and stuff. And I think his brother hosted it. And, you know, the line, it'd be like, oh, you open up. And I was like, oh, that was supposed to be $1 amount, but it was just a slideshow of Ethan's time at camp or whatever. So that was my first, technically, the first times I got paid to write comedy. And it would probably be years from that I would again. You know, because it's tough. I mean, you start doing stand-up and you're always going to be able to do stand-up and writing comedy for free. And it's the getting paid for it part that's takes, you know, time that you kind of have to start drawing some lines where you're like, okay, well, this is something that, you know, I think a lot of people, I mean, in Florida, you know, because I started in New York and even in Chicago, where I lived for a few years, while from like 2016 to summer of last year, while my fiance, we're legally married. So I like switched between wife and fiance. We had to push our wedding off for over a year and a half because of, I don't know if you checked the news, but lots of stuff happening. So, yeah, you know, it's New York, especially in the city, you just don't get paid much unless you leave the city or if you do a private gig or something. And then Chicago, even, it's also a big city and it's still pretty underpaid, but even there's more of a kind of an expectation of bar shows will pay, kind of try and pass around a bucket and pay people out. And I think it's actually getting better in New York too, from the times I've come back and done shows even before COVID times. So I don't know. Florida, I imagine, I've only done stand-up in Florida once for the Orlando Indie Comedy Fest. But I imagine, you know, it's probably more of an expectation. I feel like outside of places where you have a huge oversupply of comedians, there's kind of more of an expectation that people will get something for it, because you're not just hoping that, oh man, what if the booker from Seth Meyers is one of the 4 people in this bar basement? Like, oh, you know.
Indeed, most definitely. And sometimes we get paid and sometimes we don't. It's just like any other scene, it seems like. It's like,
yeah, I mean, that's what I figure. Yeah, it's just ratios, difference of ratios.
Absolutely. And speaking of festivals, you were the winner at Snubfest. And what were some memories from Snubfest?
Snubfest was interesting. That was actually the summer of 2016. What a time. Before I moved to Chicago, before we moved to Chicago for that time. So it was in Chicago. And it was that actually was Fest I thought it was a good show. Fest, they might be overselling it slightly. Although I do think it was a few, I don't know how many shows it was actually. There was only one show I was on that was like maybe 14 comedians. And it was kind of like they had different, I think 4 different bookers who each picked a favorite. Or there was 3 bookers and then 1 audience favorite. And the audience favorite was someone brought like half the people there and they just chose her, which, you know, whenever things are left up to audience vote in festivals or competitions, there's always going to be the person who brings like a bunch of the crowd, which, I mean, that's always the thing. New York, especially, there's all, or at least has been, all these like bringer shows, which are considered pretty looked down upon. You know, like the idea, I mean, I'll say for anyone who doesn't, where people have to bring audience. And I think the thing that is the biggest issue with that concept, because people will say, well, it's always, every show is a bringer show, because once, Jim Gaffigan's doing a bringer show, it's just that he tweets, I'm going to be in, the AutoZone Arena in Poughkeepsie, and then 30,000 people come out, and he brought them all. And it's like, sure, but also he has an agent and publicist and people promoting this, and the AutoZone Arena has their stuff. Like, it's kind of disingenuous to suggest that. But even then, I don't think the objection is even necessarily just that, well, you have to bring the people out. It's that you're being relied upon to do all that work of bringing people out, of promoting it, of getting audience there at all for the venue. And it's like, well, what is the venue doing in that case, other than being a space, which, the alternative is a lot of times comics, if they need a tape to submit to something, and they're not necessarily, they may not be booked on a show that would easily allow for that. They, a lot of times, like 5 or 6 comics will be like, hey, let's all try and rent out this space or have this space, and we'll get we each know that we can make sure that there's at least 6 people here. We'll have a nice crowd. We can get someone to tape it. And that to me is different, because it's like everyone, because you're the ones producing it, So of course, but sorry, now I'm blanking on why I brought up bringer shows, because because of the voting. And there's nothing at the end of the day. Whenever there's also I booked a weekly show for a while in New York. I booked a weekly show for a smaller while in Chicago. The fact is, you don't want to ever book anyone who you don't think is funny. But if someone says, hey, I've got family in town and I'm not booked on anything, and they said they want to see me perform, and you think they're funny, but you might have not been looking to book them the next week, but they're they've got 5 people who want to see me, you're like, yeah, sure. That matters. You want there to be audience there, and as long as they're funny anyway, that's not nothing. So it kind of feels the same, where you're like, look, you can get one of these top 3 spots at the festival. It's like a half the audience. I don't know. It's not the most professional thing to occur, obviously, but it's not as though they explicitly said that to anyone. They just said there's going to be an audience vote component, and they probably know at least one of the 16 people or whatever booked to do it is going to know enough people or be desperate enough to have that audience vote, where they're going to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to fill out half the room. My brother-in-law had a bachelor party in Kentucky and in Louisville, and I'd kind of gone back and forth, because a lot of times, whenever I visit somewhere, I always want to book at least one show, even if I'm not going for comedy reasons, because you're like, oh, it's cool to perform in another scene, to make more connections, to meet other comics. Sometimes you can make some money, but even aside from that, it's like, oh, I like trying out stuff in other places. And I hadn't asked about it, because I kind of was like, oh, is that going to be tacky that I'm going to be one of the nights of his bachelor party? I'm going to be like, all right, I'll see you guys. You can come if you want. I booked a show. We only got to be there for 3 days. And a week beforehand, he was like, hey, are you booked on anything? It'd be great, to catch a show if you're on it, one of the nights. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah. So I messaged someone I know who's a comic, Andy Fleming, who was in Louisville. Now it's in Chicago when I was there. But I don't remember if he would still split his time at all. But he started in Louisville, and he got me in touch with Reed Sedgwick. That's who it was. who books a show in Louisville, and I told them I was like, oh, I know it's short notice, it's a week away, but here's a tape, and I'm gonna be there with a bachelor party, so like 13 people or something, and I don't feel bad about that. I mean, I know if I was in the same position, as long as I thought the person was funny, I'd be like, yeah, that's going to be most of the audience probably at a bar show. And, it was great. The only thing is if they're only going to come if like, and then leave, then that's not great. But like I knew, it was part of the activity. So.
Indeed, and I know Reed because I went and did an open mic in Louisville, and I got to meet some of the fine folks in that city, and she's pretty awesome. Like she did a tour here in Jacksonville, and so it's pretty rad. And my buddy Michael Kinberger is pretty popular in that city too, so I love that city. And you were also a finalist at the Laughing Devil Comedy Festival there too. And what was that like? Some memories from that festival?
Yeah, so that was actually the first, or maybe my second or third trip back to New York, where I, after going to Chicago, so that was 2017, and it was one of the ones that's kind of, it's structured like a competition, and it's like 4 shows or so. It's funny because I posted, I feel like a lot of these, when you post something, you sort of be somewhat self-deprecating, whatever. I said like, oh, I'm here. I look forward to losing in the final round to Luke Moniz, which is what ended up happening. So that was fun. I posted that like the day I got in. It was at not. Oh wait, no, I think it was Broadway Comedy Club actually. It was Broadway Comedy Club, which I did. I barked for like in my second week or so of stand up, and I did that like twice. One time, because I don't know if I said people know, but barking is you, for anyone who's unaware, you are one of those annoying people on the street who says, oh, comedy show, and you lie about who's going to be on the lineup and give people tickets, and then they don't show up. And the first time I did it, I had 2 friends who came out anyway, because it was really early into me doing stand-up, and I don't think they'd seen me at all. And then the next week, I didn't manage to get anyone in, because barking in Times Square is a nightmare. And the guy was like, oh, you didn't get anyone in. I mean, I'd love to put you up, but I can't. I'm sorry, man. Which I was like pretty frustrated by at the time. I had also been barking and barked for much longer at oh man, I'm blanking on the name of it now. The Comedy Corner in the East Village, and there they would you'd go up regardless, as long as you spent the time barking. And they might say, and I ended up actually being in charge of barkers there a few months after I started, because things were not very well run. They put an 18-year-old in charge of stuff at one point, just because I was the most senior barker when that person left, because people just cycled through. I barked there with Emma Willman early on, who now has been on Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, Colbert. She's funny. But yeah, so there at least you would go, and even if you didn't get anyone in, I mean, you weren't getting paid. So you got paid in stage time. So you went out and you did it, and if you never got anyone in, then it was fine. If someone would say like, hey, you never get anyone in, this isn't going to work. But I thought if you are out there, you did the work, you should get the time. and then just say, but not next time, because no one came, whatever, fine. And I called that week and I was like, hey, I didn't say that was the reason. I was just like, oh, my schedule changed. I can't come into Bark anymore. And the guy was like, you think I'm going to beg you to Bark at my Times Square comedy club? And I was like, my schedule changed. And he's like, do you go up to the hottest girl at the party and think she's going to hit on you? And it's like, no, I don't. But also, why won't you just accept this lie I'm telling you? So I don't have to tell you that the real reason is I don't think this is a good way to run it. But yeah, I was at Broadway, and it was like a few nights. And yeah, I ended up in the finals. And I think it got like 6th or something, which was fine. The weird thing about festivals like that, where there's like the competition aspect, unless they also have shows for the quote unquote losers to do anyway, you either hope you're going to win or you hope you're going to lose immediately, and then you can be done. Because you're like, it feel worse to be like I did one in Indianapolis. I once ended up stuck in Indianapolis for like 3 extra days because I did a festival there, and I got eliminated like immediately. And then I was just like, nothing to do. I was staying with another comic who, Jim Weber, was as far as I can tell when staying with him, a really great guy. He passed, unfortunately. But he worked in a movie theater, so we got to go watch Jurassic World. And there was like no food around where he lived. I like looked up like anything nearby, and I just had to walk like 10 minutes to a Subway. So I don't know if it's living in some food desert in Indianapolis, but yeah, so that was the Laughing Devil Fest. Luke did win it. Luke, very funny comedian, does it's on What a Time to Be Alive podcast a lot. So that's a fun podcast, and he's great. Check out Luke Moniz. He did a set for Comedy Central Digital that you can watch whenever you want.
Indeed, and I remember being a barker at a place in Orlando when they were open, and it was just an open mic. But I remembered one of the times some lady just barfed and just threw the whole show off. It was just like, too much drinking for her. So, or maybe she had like a stomach flu or something. But you, speaking of other competitions, you were part of the TBS Rooftop Comedy Competition too. You were a semifinalist, and what were those memories like?
So that was in college. There was this TBS Rooftop thing that it was like a real thing. It was my first. The first time I got to participate was my first year doing stand-up. And so TBS partnered with Rooftop Comedy. And the way it was supposed to work is that, they'd get in touch with, for a lot of schools, it'd be like the stand-up club. Like for schools that would have that were like on campus, that were somewhere where, people would like stand up club, and presumably the club would like put on shows and mics and whatever. But I went to Tisch at NYU, and NYU, because it's just in the city, there was no stand-up club. People who went to NYU and did stand-up just went to mics and tried to get booked on shows in the city. People would do shows on campus. Like I actually did a monthly show in my dorm for a little while, which that was like people who I'd met kind of through the Comedy Corner, and other people I knew at this black box theater in Rubin Dormitory where I stayed freshman year. But there wasn't like a stand-up club like there were for other ones. The way it was supposed to work is that the first round was that every school would have its own comedy competition where they pick the top 8 comedians there, and then they would like tell Rooftop TBS, here are the 8 comedians, and then there was a show. The first year was at the comic strip, and they would have the 16 comics, 3 minutes each. All the sets were recorded. Judges there would pick the top 4 from each school, and this would happen simultaneously across the country. I think there were 32 schools that were pit against each other, maybe even 64. I'm not sure. 64 or 32, March Madness bracket style. That would be pit against each other, the top 8 from each school. The judges would pick top 4, and then there was online voting between those 4, and people could watch the sets and then do that. So ours, I don't know exactly how the original communication worked, but Alex Edelman, who I met when I at NYU, we both went to NYU together. He was 1 year ahead of me. Although I don't know if he actually organized that first year. Because that first year, Danny Jollis, the comedians, let's see if I can remember everyone who was in it. Because like I said, we didn't have a stand-up club, and we didn't do the thing you were theoretically supposed to do, where there would be like an on-campus competition. It was whoever the point person was. So it was either Alex or Danny Jollis, I think, just sort of picked 8 people who they knew, who we had performed together and stuff. So it was, I don't know if I'm going to remember. I think the first year, this was my freshman year, was Alex Edelman, who he's been on like Conan now, Live at the Apollo in England. He's done stuff in like England, Edinburgh. He wrote for The Great Indoors with Joel McHale, I think, on CBS. Maybe. It's not on anymore, so I'm not doing paid promotion. Or you could probably find it on Hulu, however many episodes they have. But it's Alex Edelman, Danny Jollis, who was a senior then and has been on like Crazy Ex-Girlfriend and Conan or Corden or one of them. Billy Procida, who has a podcast about sex work and sex generally. Gabriel Lax, who we lived together for a few years towards the end of college and the year after I graduated. And he stopped doing stand-up after a little while. It was really funny, but he just focused on writing and directing and stuff. We did a short film that I co-wrote with him that he directed. Esther Steinberg. And now I think Eli Shapiro, but I don't remember if he was in the first year or if that was only the second one. So I'm like already running out. Actually, I want to see. Sorry, I'm going to look up and see if I can find Rooftop Comedy NYU 2009 competition. I want to see if the lineup for everyone is there. So we did. I think I might have found it on the comics comic. Okay, it doesn't seem to have the names of the people, but Gibran Salim, that he was also there. Anyway, point being, so the first year, I think we didn't really give much effort to the online voting. So the way the online voting worked is you had to make an account, and then you could vote every 5 minutes. And I'm sure this was just to goose the engagement and the clicks on their website, because the issue with that is it's not a good way to get an organic voting total from people, because you need people who are both invested enough to make an account, which means they probably are somewhat connected to the actual people in the competition, if not, as it turned out, the people themselves, or you and then you can vote every 5 minutes. So it's like people who are like definitely invested, because you're not going to get random people. Even if they vote once, it doesn't mean anything if someone can vote 3 times that time. So we lost the first round. We were picked, and then it went to online voting, and then we were just like, it'd be cool. I don't know. We probably told people. The next year, I was more committed to it, certainly. And I had us I made 26 accounts with 26 emails, because I could autofill. I would hit like A, have the login saved, go in, vote, log out. B, I had an account for B. It would autofill, log in, vote. C, etc. And by the time I finished all 26, 5 minutes would pass. And I could start over with A. So I would spend like an hour at a time just going in, doing that to choose the votes. And like, I don't know, that's what everyone did. I mean, that's the only way, unless everyone agreed not to do that. That's what it was like designed to do. We ended up that year, we made to the finals or semifinals against Penn State, where you had to re-record. So it was all voting based off those initial sets the night of. And then you would record a roast video. And so we recorded that roast video, and then you'd vote on the roast video. We'd like roast their school. We found it recently. It's funny to look back at, like some of the jokes. I think it was right before the Paterno, the Sandusky scandal broke. So none of that was incorporated, probably for the best. And they had apparently a whole computer lab of people working on it. So at least that was the rumor at the time. I can ask Brandon Scott Wolf, who was on the Penn team, ended up winning, and we're buds now, which is funny after all the, brutal competition in college. I forget if I ever asked him. I think he said they did do that. But like I said, I had a bunch of accounts and was trying to goose it because you had to. It wasn't about which sets were best after the first night with the judges, where they picked the people they thought were the best. After that, it was all just trying to click a thing as much as you could. So yeah, I did that for freshman year, sophomore year, junior year. I think we did it, but I might have actually not been one of the top 4. I think that's the year Jabron Salim was in it. I don't think he was in one of the first ones. But and then senior year, I think it was done. I don't know if Rooftop Comedy still does stuff anymore. TBS is still around, but I guess they've altered focus.
Indeed, most definitely. And you've also been selected for a few more festivals, which was the first we'll talk about is the Accidental Comedy Festival. And what are some of your favorite memories from that festival?
Oh, Accidental Comedy Festival. It's put on by Ramon Rivas, who's hello, whoa, hey, we got a guest. Oop, sorry, you didn't even get to see him. Reggie, do you want to come here? No, he's busy. All right, if he comes back, I'll try and to get him on camera. Hey, here he is. Reggie, look over here. Reg. Okay, he doesn't want to look over here. Sorry about that. So are you coming back? He doesn't know what he's gonna do. He just came in from a walk. Okay. So it's organized. It was started by Ramon Rivas, who's a very funny comedian. He's been on like Comedy Central and other places. And he was in Cleveland, and to my understanding, like really, was sort of got a lot of stuff going in the scene there, and was kind of like the godfather of the Cleveland comedy scene. Apologies if there's a different godfather of the Cleveland comedy scene who I'm underselling, but that's, from my limited knowledge of the Cleveland comedy scene. And that was just a great festival. I think that's honestly my favorite festival I've done, because so often, with these, you have to pay your own way there. You have to find a place to stay. You have to eat your own food. And then you do like one or two shows to not that many people. And it's just sort of, it's you network with other comedians. You get to hopefully do good shows. Some of them, they're like quote unquote industry, all depends. But Accidental Comedy Festival, so you still had to get there on your own, which this is short, like right when we moved to Chicago, and I drove down with another comedian, Derek Graff, who's in the festival. And so other than that, which I spent paid $30, my share of gas. We stopped at a Hardee's or something, and I got fries and chicken nuggets. But other than that, as soon as we got there, they had a hostel. They put us all up in, all the comedians in the hostel. Booze, food, everything was covered. The shows were great. It's this bowling alley. They held it. It's like a bowling alley with a concert venue on top. Or maybe it's a concert venue with a bowling alley underneath. And there were like 6 different stages in the building. And I did 5 or 6 shows. I made sure to do a completely different set for each one, which is just, sort of my own thing I wanted to do over like 3 days. I got to open for Beth Stelling on one of the main shows, which was great. Like a packed room, awesome crowd. And like I said, just free, just all our food covered, drinks covered. It was just nice feeling like, oh, someone made this like a worthwhile experience beyond like the people you'll meet, the connections you might make, whatever. So it was a really, really great experience. I did get sick at the very end before we had to go, because I get, stomach issues, but it's all right. Took some Imodium before the drive back to Chicago in the middle of the night and managed. So I don't know what the current status is now. This was 2016, and it's still, I think, hands down my favorite festival I've done, just because we were completely taken care of, which is, so nice compared to some of the ones, like I said, where you get there and it's just like, well, go. Hopefully you find a couch to crash on. Hopefully you get some food.
Indeed. And you were also on the Out of Bounds Festival, and what was that? Some memories from that show?
Yeah, so that was in Austin, and that was also, I think, a little later in 2016. And my brother-in-law had recently moved to Austin, so that was actually very convenient. That was a fun one. The shows I did there, I booked an extra show on top of the 2 that I was doing as part of the festival. Those were fun shows. That one, I mean, like I said, most festivals, honestly, you don't even expect the, post-COVID, I can only imagine. I'm sure it's going to be even rougher, because who knows? Maybe some of the places will be willing to offer deals to try and get tourism. Guess we'll see. But did a couple really fun shows and stayed at my brother-in-law's. And I specifically remember this one night that I was there at like 3 a.m. You start hearing this dog just barking and yelling, and I can't fall asleep. It's so loud. It's constant barking and yelling and whining. And I go downstairs, and my brother-in-law's there, and he's awake. And he's like, yeah, you heard that dog? I'm like, yeah, I can't sleep. He's like, yeah, me neither. We turn on the TV. They had the Point Break remake was showing on something, which is not great. it is pretty boring, which helped us, I think, fall asleep on the couch. Apologies to whoever made that. It looks like an ad for GoPro. It's just like they're like, I've never actually seen the original Point Break, but this one they're just like, oh, we're snowboarding. All right, now we're gonna go sand surfing. Now we're parachuting. It literally just looks like a GoPro ad because they have them all going through these extreme sports. And then finally the dog quiets down and I go to sleep. And the next morning, because I was working remote, this was before I think I had my current. I think I was writing quizzes at the time for this agency out in LA. They wanted, I forget how they found me, but they wanted me to write like quizzes for this campaign they were doing as part of some kind of educational series or something. And so I was working on that, and I went outside, and there was the neighbor, and I was like, hey, just so you know, your dog was barking really loud for like a long time late last night. And he goes, yeah, you know what that is? That's people probably walking by. It's good. There've been some break-ins. He's just trying to protect everyone. Like, I mean, it was like constant barking for an hour. I don't think it was just a couple people. Yeah, it might be. It's probably that if some cars drove by or something, we sometimes yell at the cars. I'm like, again, this was like an hour of him barking at like 4 a.m. I don't think it was just some cars. And he's like, well, you know what might have been? I was out drinking last night. I got back. He was out in the shed. He got himself all tangled up in a rope ladder. Couldn't get out. I had to let him out when I got back. I was like, I think that's the one. I think you nailed it. I think it was the third one. Third time's the charm. I think it was probably that your dog was terrified and imprisoned, screaming for help, and you found him that way. Weird. I feel like at that point, though, right, you should just either say initially, like, oh, yeah, my dog got stuck in something while I was out, and I got back and found him. Or just lie. Just keep lying. Just shrug and go, yeah, weird. I don't know. Like he was just thinking, like, man, I've got excuses if this guy asks me twice. But if he asks me a third time, I'm just going to have to come clean. I left my dog tied up in a rope ladder all night. And then he asked if he could have my brother-in-law's fire pit when he left, his barbecue pit. And I said, or he said he lent, I think, a smoker to the people who used to live there. And I asked if he could have it back. And I was like, I will ask him. And I don't think he had it.
Indeed. And how about some memories from the Cream City Comedy Fest?
That was in Wisconsin. It was in Milwaukee. That one was 2019. So that's more recent. That was like in May 2019, I think. And that's when we were in Chicago. So we didn't I didn't stay over there at all. Because it's, Milwaukee is like practically a suburb of Chicago. It's like an hour to drive. Traffic's not too bad. So I drove there with my fiance / wife. Again, we're married in the eyes of the state, but like I said, we had to delay our wedding for COVID. And we drove there one of the days, and the next day I just drove on my own. I think there was a big game that night because that one there wasn't quite as attended. It was at the Pabst. Pabst like has a theater attached to their brewery. So that was kind of cool, I guess. But and the other one was in this cool, like really artsy Milwaukee bar, and there were some older people in the crowd, which sometimes I worry about because old people don't always get it, man. But they were hip with it. They were cool cats. So that was a fun one. It was easy enough to get to, and we stopped at a Vietnamese restaurant on the way back after that first show. That was pretty good. So.
Awesome. And from my backyard, the Orlando Indie Comedy Festival. What memories do you have from that one?
That was in that was a fun one. That was, the weather was real nice. There was like 3 nights of shows. It was, do you know, okay, wait, I gotta look up his name. It's Tim Murphy.
Yep.
Yeah, he's a great guy. So when I got in, my flight was super delayed. I ended up getting in at like 2 a.m. And so he picked me up at the airport at 2 a.m. That was another one where actually they covered our hotel and they got us to and from the airport. And we got food mostly covered and drinks mostly covered. So that was another nice one where they took good care of us. He picked me up at like 2 a.m. and the festival was sponsored by White Claw. And so he picked me up in his pickup truck and was like, "You want a White Claw?" It's like 2:30 at the airport. Like, I have a cooler full of White Claw because they're sponsoring the festival. And I was like, sure, I will have a post-airport 2:30 a.m. White Claw, and then had more White Claws throughout the time. It was in March in Orlando, so the weather was like perfect. And, it's a bigger... It's everything was a little spread out. Like, it was probably a half-hour walk from the hotel to the venues, but it was like a nice walk. So yeah, I remember that was we also watched, it was the Oscars, and I wanted to watch the Oscars, so I got some other comedians together. We watched it in someone's room, and Shape of Water won. That's the year it was. It's 2018. And I wanted Daniel Kaluuya from Get Out to win, but he didn't. I think they gave it to Gary Oldman for being Churchill.
Indeed. And how about Motor City Comedy Festival?
I was Detroit, and I had broken my foot like a month or so before. So I did some of the shows kind of sitting down or leaning off of it. It's the only time I've been to Detroit so far. Whenever you tell someone that you ask someone in Detroit, like, you're like, oh, so do you live in Detroit? And they'll be like, no, actually I live in Hammertrack. It's like 10 minutes away from here. It's like, just say yes. Anywhere else you tell someone, like, people live in a suburb, in Chicago, if they'll live at like Morton Grove or something, and they'll just say, oh, I live in Chicago, and they live like, an hour's drive from the city in traffic. But Detroit, for whatever reason, someone will live, one half their house outside of the technical city limit of Detroit proper, and they're like, no. And I don't know if it's just because there's a certain cred that they don't want to like steal Detroit valor by saying they live in Detroit when they don't. But that was a fun one. They gave us food. It's so funny to go. I had a place to stay. One of Jeff Horst, who's funny comics, been on Jeff has been on Kevin Hart's Heart of the City, Detroit. He was on that, and he was on, got a half-hour special for the Kevin Hart's Next Level thing. So I crashed on his couch. They had a cat, and I find it's funny. I feel like for these festivals, I just tick down like had place to stay, did feed us, did cover some of that. So whenever you get treated nice, the hospitality, they were very welcoming. Everyone there. I went to we watched Detroiters recently for the first time, which I hadn't seen before. But people, talked it up. And I love Sam Richardson and Tim, I don't know why I'm blanking on his name, from I Think You Should Leave, Robinson. Sam Richardson and Tim Robinson. That's why I think, so my head was like not remembering if their last names are so close. That's a fun show. There's an episode where they start off, they go to bowling, which is football bowling, where you throw a football at bowling pins, and I was like, I did that. I did because they brought the comics there to do bowling. I did poorly. A, because my foot was in a medical boot, and B, because I would anyway, because I am not good at throwing a football. But
Indeed.
yeah, that was also a fun time.
And some memories from the Boston Comedy Arts Festival.
So that I'm gonna, if you don't mind, I think I may have to go in a little.
Oh, for sure. I
I don't
totally
know if there's anything
understand.
you want to cover otherwise before we
Yep.
start winding down. Do you want me to just touch on that and then?
Yep. And we'll touch on the Memphis Comedy Festival, and then we'll go with your nominations for the your comics for the future episodes of the show, and then we'll do a part 2 later on down the road.
Okay, cool. That sounds good. Yeah. Oh,
Okay.
I didn't know I had to prepare someone right now. Yeah, I'll oh man, I'll think of people. So the okay, I have some people in mind already. Good. So I did Boston Comedy Arts Festival. I'm just gonna do these ones kind of quick because I gotta start winding down. But Boston Comedy Arts Festival was in Boston. I think that might have been when Liz was going to Brandeis there. So I'd go and visit Boston anyway. Fun town. I like it. It's really great in the fall. I think this might have been March. I don't remember. Was it September? It was in the fall. Got to open for. I'm blanking on his name. Tim Meadows. I can't remember any Tims. Got to open for Tim Meadows. I saw him in my head. I was like, I know who Tim Meadows is, but I couldn't remember. Open for Tim Meadows. He was very chill and I think was very in and out, but was very nice. So that was cool. Memphis Comedy Festival. That was a while ago. That was 2013, I think. And like I said, my parents still live in Memphis, so I got to stay with them. So that was nice enough. I met some people who I'd later see afterwards. That one, I mostly just stayed with my parents over Shabbos and then went to go do shows. And yeah, so that's it's I hope that for many reasons, but I really hope with vaccines starting to roll out and everything, which anyone watching this can get me help me jump the line on vaccines. Yes, please. I want one. Give it to me. I just hope that all this is gonna come back sooner rather than later. I think it's gonna be. A lot of places obviously went out of business. Unfortunately, the Creek and the Cave, which is like a New York institution in comedy, is gone. But I think we're gonna see. The thing I've always said is that comedians have wanted to do this more than people have wanted to see it for a long time now, and somehow we've made that work. And we, I think it's always been tough to find venues. It's always been tough to find audiences. It's going to be interesting to see if people are going to, the obvious downside is all the places that went out of business. It'll be interesting to see if there's a real demand for going out and seeing stuff live once it's done. If people are going to be like, after a year and a half, people are going to be like, no, I want to go do something. I want to go do something today. I want to go see something. Hopefully some of these places can be bought up or revitalized, or people can open places up. I'm sure the only rent will be somewhat cheaper. And people, I hope will be sooner rather than later at that point where, I'll have new festivals I can say, oh yeah, great, fed me, didn't feed me, housed me here, whatever. I'm hoping to do Edinburgh Fringe at the end of 2022. We'll see how realistic that'll be given global circumstances. And yeah, let's see about that. Other comedians who are great. I'll name a couple people. Out of Chicago, I met Larry in Chicago. I know he's back in Florida now, but we crossed over in Chicago. He runs that great show. I'm sure he talked about What Do You Want From Us? He's been doing. I was fortunate enough to be on the first live show version of it, and I did his online a couple times online now, which has been the best, hands down, the best Zoom shows, like Zoom stand-up, because that's always so weird, but that I've done. But yeah, so I'll say a couple other comics who I crossed paths with in Chicago. Liz Greenwood, she has been on Jeopardy, which I think a disproportionate number of people who have been on Jeopardy are comedians, but most comedians still have not been on Jeopardy. She's funny. And James Fisher Jr. is another Chicago comic who's super funny and great. Yeah, so those are a couple people. I can think of other people. I realize I have to on the spot, but yeah, thank you for having me.
You're welcome anytime, and Andrew, and thank you for being my guest. And we'll do a part 2 in the future, and we'll carry on from when you co-founded the Empire Biscuit Comedy Festival, and then we'll keep on going from that point on forward. And then we'll jump into the usual questions I ask comics. And so I'll reach out for a future date. We'll pick one soon, and we'll go from there. And thank you so much for being my guest, and all that good stuff. And we're raising funds for the South Brooklyn Mutual Aid as well.
Yeah.
And so, why did you pick those fine folks?
So I mean, I didn't know. I sort of was a little. I don't. So the charities I've supported over the last year or so. So I've supported a few different funds for BLM and for specifically in Louisville, in Minneapolis, and then a few that were like split more generally. I donated to, there was a fund for candidates in state house races to try and flip things. I donated to Yellowhammer Fund in Alabama for abortion access there, but I'd been meaning to, especially once things were less little COVID-y, I kind of have wanted to volunteer with a mutual aid organization, and especially now a lot of people having difficulty being fed with the pandemic, on top of all the time. That's the thing. I like the idea, of mutual aid organizations, and the sort of ethos behind it is not, because charity is better than nothing, obviously, but I definitely am someone who thinks that the better world will be one in which charities don't exist, because charities are there filling in something that it's not ideal that a few rich people get to decide on their whim who gets to eat or have a place to sleep. Everyone should have those things by virtue of being human and basic human dignity, and because we have enough for people to have that, and it's just not distributed appropriately. It'd be one thing, if we had to ration these things, but we waste so much food. And so the idea of mutual aid, I guess, from what I've seen and read, and why I want to try and get more involved with it, is trying to move towards a model of mutual help and community help, and people looking out for each other and supporting each other, and not just sort of idealizing this notion of relying on a few rich people to give whatever scraps they feel like. And why South Brooklyn Mutual Aid is because I Googled yesterday when you mentioned that I'd get to pick a charity support, and I was like, I want to help out a Brooklyn Mutual Aid org, and I looked around a little, and this one looks good. So they are not paying me to say that. They don't even know I am.
Most definitely, and thank you so much for raising funds for him. And follow Andrew on Instagram, Twitter. Donate to his Venmo if you can, and visit his website that's scrolling on the bottom, and subscribe to his YouTube channel. And they're all also beneath in the description box below. So, with that being said, we'll do a part two in the future. And Andrew, thank you so much for being my guest on the Stand Up Speakeasy and all that good stuff. And we'll see you in the future. And for everyone else, be safe out there and take care of each other. And we'll see you on the next episode of the Stand Up Speakeasy.